Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are. My name is Alex, and I'm happy you joined our webinar. And this time it's about automating the deployment with OneDeploy. If you hear me well and if you see my screen, please drop a message into the chat like exclamation mark or plus or five, something like that. So I know that I'm perfectly audible. Thank you, Simon. Thank you, and welcome, y'all. Cool. So let us begin with introducing what are we going to talk about today. So our agenda is just to talk about the project, right? So what this project is, and then we'll look how to adjust it and how to start using it, right? Because we can customize, we can adjust it so it suits our needs. Now, first thing first about it. So, OpenNebula deploy or OneDeploy, that is the repository that contains Ansible playbooks. And that Ansible playbook can, or collection actually, can be used to deploy an OpenNebula in different scenarios. So you may have a necessity to deploy multiple open nebulas in a row, or you may need to just keep all the infrastructure as the code. I know if that makes sense. So that is the tool that can help you with that. And that basically is a tool set that relies on Ansible's advanced templating, and it supports the Jinja 2 templating, right? So under the hood, there is a lot of Jinja and a lot of modifications and so on and so forth. Now, you may find this in Ansible Galaxy, and so in the Galaxy repository, you will find the version, but this one is outdated, right? So if you would like to use OneDeploy, you should always go and grab the latest version from our GitHub. So we rolled that one once, and we're not going to, at least for now, there is no plan to actively maintain that also in the Ansible Galaxy Collection repository, right? So if you really would like to get this one, just go to our GitHub and get the latest and greatest version of it. Now there are some requirements, and obviously these requirements depend on the use case. But the general requirement is that you should have Ansible on the version from the 2.14 to 2.16, because there is the ability to also use Ceph-based storage. So that one, so we had some issues with the newer versions of Ansible and Ceph deployments. That's why if you are planning to use Ceph, then you will need to proceed with the version that is within this range that you see on screen. Then also, well, we know that OpenNebula supports a variety of operating systems where you can run front end and what you can use as the virtualization hosts. But the OneDeploy is limited to Ubuntu 22.04 or 24.04 with NetPlan, or RHEL 9 and the derivatives, supported derivatives of the RHEL 9 with Network Manager. So, for example, you don't see Debian here, right? That is just something to keep in mind. That if you are planning to use Debian, then probably OneDeploy in its vanilla state, in its current state, is not a way to go. If you plan to go with either Ubuntu or let's say RHEL 9 or Alma Linux, then this OneDeploy is obviously the way to go. and you're supposed to have the secure shell access to the target servers. That's pretty much logical thing to have, but just worth to mention that you would like to have the secure shell access to these target servers because, well, that's how Ansible works, right? Some of the obviously considerations. So OneDeploy is the Ansible collection. So it just not a bunch of bunch of stuff. There's actually a very structured Ansible collection. So if you look around some other Ansible projects, then their structure might different because, well, OneDeploy is the Ansible collection, and that's actually how you also install that using the Ansible Galaxy collection command line. Now, the format would be OpenNebula dot collection name, in this case, deploy, and then following by yet another dot, and then the access to the playbook. Right. So, and then whatever, if you are going to create your custom playbooks, which obviously feel free to do that. So feel free to take the existing ones and then enhance them and create your playbooks that just going to follow your specific, to facilitate your specific needs. They all will be accessible under the OpenNebula deploy, then dot, and then your custom playbook name. And then what else to consider is that the inventory markup language is YAML. So as you know, Ansible may use different formats of the inventories. Now, we are using YAML, and the reason for that is that we do have quite a complex structure inside of that, because within the inventory you can also specify different variables that, for example, for storage you can define networks and so on and so forth. And yeah, so to achieve that, we must use YAML. So the INI or INI is not the way to go in that case. And also what to consider, that OneDeploy only goes that far, right? So OneDeploy will will install OpenNebula, will configure the networks, will configure the storage, but the scope is still remains OpenNebula, right? So if you would like um, to configure the storage itself, right, then OneDeploy is not going to do it for you. So you need to prepare your storage to be used with OpenNebula, right? For example, same goes with networks and with all other dependencies. So OpenNebula can install some packages, but if you have some complex routing, then you will need to configure this complex routing yourself. Or alternatively, obviously, you can create your custom playbook and run it before OneDeploy, and then run all the OneDeploy stuff after that. So just to be aware that there's still something that most likely you will need to configure manually to prepare your open Nebula deployment, to prepare your servers to deploy with OpenNebula. Right. So that would be the repository. So it's called OneDeploy, obviously. And then what else we have in OneDeploy? There's quite an extensive wiki. So you can go there and check out a lot of the examples, and also the way how you can contribute to that. So we also provide different ways so you can contribute to OneDeploy to make it better, obviously. Now, there are for example, the ways how you can deploy with a single front end and the admin network, and then all of the ways how to uh, define the network and so on and so forth. So as I said, it's quite an extensive, very deeply documented wiki page. So feel free to check this one out. Right. And yeah, so as the part of the installation, you need to download it. You need to make sure that you have on your host machine where you are going to launch the deployment. You need to make sure that you have Ansible, and then make sure that you have all the rights and all the keys set up. Now it's very very important, right? So I typically, if you would ask me what I'm doing in that regard, so I'm typically having the virtual environment with Ansible installed, so I'm not messing up with all my other installations if I'm using my laptop. But obviously, you can set up your Ansible station somewhere, so you don't even touch your laptop or your computer at all. So totally up to you, right? And then you need to clone the repository. So I've already cloned the repository. So you clone the repository, and then you need to install the all the requirements. So there are going to be a um, few dependencies that needs to be satisfied. So, and these all dependencies are in the requirements.yaml file. So we just can go like the Ansible Galaxy collection install -f and then requirements.yaml, and then it is going to try to install that. Again, I need to have the permissions, and in my case, I'm also kind of already got the thing installed, so I might have some of the errors down the line. But yeah, typically just go with the collection install -r requirements.yaml, and you get the OneDeploy installed, right? We can check this out with um, Ansible Galaxy collection list, right? And we can see that OneDeploy is there. So we can start using that OneDeploy with all our cool stuff. Now, what else should we be aware of, right? So we have the roles, we have the playbooks, and we have the inventory directories. Now, everything is defined within the roles. So whatever you do, every component will be installed based on the role. And every role has its own specific configuration pattern. So they may have some specific variables that may be only valid to this specific role, or maybe shared among the other roles, because you may have, let's say, all of the different roles may use the same virtual IP, right? Because you are using the virtual IP in the multi uh, OpenNebula in the multi OpenNebula deployment, and then in the different parts, your OpenNebula flow, the one gate will be using that virtual IP in their settings. And as I said, sometimes there might be just the variables that are valid to a specific role. Now, we have a bunch of roles, and these are going to get triggered or uh, used by the playbooks. So you are going to run a playbook, and this playbook will take your inventory file and will parse it, will extract the necessary information, and will uh, configure your OpenNebula the way that you've configured, the way that you intended to, right? So in general, the steps are: we need to install the Ansible and requirements. We need to adjust the inventory because we have some examples, sample inventories, but it may not be suitable in your environment. And at least what we need to do, we need to substitute the IP addresses, right, to set the correct one. And then we just run the deployment, get some coffee, tea, or whatever you're drinking. And yeah, that's it. It will get deployed. Now we have some main playbooks that we will be running. And typically you are going to run the main, right? So you just go Ansible playbook, then you to the you write a path to the inventory file, and then uh, you said that you'd like to run OpenNebula deploy main. Now, but if we will look into that main deployment right here, you can see that what actually we have here, we are importing two other playbooks. So main itself is just an absorption, or it absorbs uh, it absorbs two other uh, playbooks. Now, one is pre, and second one is site, right? So, what they are for. So, pre make sure to prepare your environment to deploy OpenNebula, right? So, for example, checks the Python, gathers facts, cache, and so on and so forth. So pretty much kind of a pre-deployment check. And site itself is what actually going to uh, deploy your OpenNebula, right? And then you can run each of them manually, right? So you can obviously run the OpenNebula deploy pre and then OpenNebula deploy site. You can run separately, or just for sake of easier deployment, you just run main, and then uh, it does the whole thing for you. Now, additionally, you can add to the same main, you can add your own playbooks if you need to. For example, you have the something like the NFS configuration as one of the examples. So you have a server that is going to act as the NFS storage. So what you can do, you can import this one. So the same way, just go here, and then you can do something like this. And then it's firstly going to configure your NFS, and then it's going to go to the OpenNebula stuff. So that's how you can make a pretty much one adjusted to your needs and kind of integratable, because not every um, not every environment built the same way, right? You may have different dependencies, you may have different use cases for that. So that could be the way to go if you would like to make it more custom and more adjusted to your needs. Now, and all that is pretty much based where it takes all your IP addresses, where it takes all the configuration. Obviously, it takes from the inventory. And we have a bunch of examples right here. First one is obviously example.yml. That is the example of the examples, right? And we can have a look at this one. So as the examples, or for example, we can take the local one, right, and look at this one. So let me just hide the terminal window, right? And then that is the YAML file that is going to contain all your variables plus your inventory. So the individual mapping, between the front end. So you define what's the OpenNebula front end, then you define what is the KVM host, then you also define if would you like to have Grafana with Prometheus, or you would like to have anything else, then it will be defined here. So that is one of the ways to go. Now, it's not you again. You may go just everything in one single file, or you may also move the variables into the group vars, and then keep your inventory file as clean as possible, right? So again, it is also possible and doable. So feel free to do that, right? So then, in the end of the day, let's have a look what we have here. So there are some generic Ansible variables. There are some OpenNebula specific variables. So first variable would be the Ansible user, right? So that's the user that we're going to use to connect to our target hosts. And then we have one version. So that defines which OpenNebula version you would like to run here. It might be 6.10, 6.8, right? So the one you wish, that is totally fine. Now, what else you can add here is the, as the example, that could be the OpenNebula Enterprise repository key. So if you would like to deploy and configure the OpenNebula Enterprise Edition, not the Community Edition, then you can supply your variable. You can supply OneDeploy with your key. So you get authenticated and you get the OpenNebula Enterprise Edition. Then OpenNebula Pass, so one pass, that is going to be the OpenNebula's password for the one admin. So once you get the whole deployment done, then you need to log in, obviously, and one pass is your password. Then there's also one thing called node underscore HV, so or the node hypervisor. In the most of the cases, you go with KVM, right? But it's not always like that. So sometimes you may want to deploy OpenNebula just to try it out, and you don't have the hardware virtualization enabled. So you actually can substitute this one with QEMU, right? So it's also possible. Actually, let's do it even better. Let's create a new file. So that would be, let's say, custom deployment.yaml, and let's craft it that way. So I'm going to copy all these variables here, right? So, and in my case, for this, in scope of this training, I'm going to proceed with QEMU because I don't have the hardware virtualization anywhere by my side. Right. Then the next thing would be the data stores. So with data stores, there are plenty of ways how you can define your data stores. It might be the usage of the local data stores, or you may mount something like the like NFS as the example. And I'm going to use NFS, right? It's just to demonstrate that you can automatically mount NFSs, but obviously your mileage may vary, and you may go with any other way of using your data stores. So in order to tap into the data store configuration, you need to define the data store variables with DS, and then you go with mode, and you define the mode of the data stores. In my case, I'm going to proceed with shared as my data stores. And actually, what I'm going to do, I'm going to mount the whole data stores directory as the shared one. So in my case, I just only need to say to OneDeploy that you just need to take the NFS from that server, and that's it. You may go into more complex scenarios, right? So we have right now it would be a very simplistic one, but you can go with more complex scenarios, and more complex scenarios includes where you define an each data store separately. So as you know, OpenNebula has the system, the image, and files data store. You can define all of them separately, and you can define as many as you need, and each of them can have a separate configuration. So again, whatever is your use case, just have a look in the examples with uh, that deployment, and it will give you an idea. Just remember that we have a thing in OpenNebula called ID, right? So that would be the directory that will be created under the data stores directory, and then you need to kind of guess a little bit. If you go with a lot of data stores, you kind of need to guess the ID um, of the data store, but it's very easy, right? We have three data stores that are by default. So the system, the system, images, and files, and they have the following ID 0, 1, and 2. So these are predefined. And when you create your new data store, so any new data store will start from 100. So the next data store I'm going to create will have the ID of 100. The next one is 101, then 102, and with increment by 1. So this is how you can guess, right? And map the data stores accordingly. So you make sure that you are mounting the correct data store into the correct directory, right? So I define that my data store mode is shared, and as I mentioned, I'm going into a very simplistic deployment use case. So I'm just placing all of the data store onto a shared NFS server, and that I need to tell to OneDeploy to change the FS tab and to add the path. Now, I've installed my environment in a certain way, right? So I have the private IP address of my NFS node. It is right here. And then I have a specific directory that was shared, and that is SRV1 storage. So in my FS tab, I will need to mount this thing, right? So that kind of in this will be performed on every node that I'm going to use in this deployment, right? So again, your mileage may vary and your configuration may vary. So you really need to kind of do a paper and pencil homework before going and try to use OneDeploy blindly. So you need to plan it a little bit and kind of make sure that all that makes sense, I'd say, before trying out. I mean, you can try out as much as you can, but in order to avoid some small mistakes, I would suggest to firstly draw the way how you'd like your environment to look like. Anyhow, so the DS mode is switched to shared, and FS tab will be configured. Now, when we're going to check whether it's mounted correctly, we can just look at the free or at the available size or at the total size. Now, all my nodes, they have 40 gigs of free disk space, or total disk space actually. Then the NFS server is bigger. It's close to 100 gigs. So when we're going to check out whether it actually works and whether it's actually mounted in the front end in Sunstone, we're supposed to see that the total disk space on the data store should be close to 100 gigs. Then we can say that it was mounted correctly. Right. So the data store is there. The node virtualization. So the virtualization is set to QEMU. Again, your might be different. Mine is QEMU just because I don't have the nodes with the exposed hardware virtualization available at the moment. Right. So next, what we need to do, we must configure virtual networks, right? So because virtual network is something that you would like to have as well, and you can configure these virtual networks using OneDeploy. So you can have one network, you can have multiple networks, as many networks as you wish. And again, the beauty is that you pretty much can do it as a code, right? So you don't need to write a complex API scripts or whatever. You just do it as the code inside of the Ansible inventory file. And another cool thing is that it pretty much follows the typical OpenNebula template or OpenNebula config file, uh, uh, let's say notation. So you pretty much use the same. You could structure a file the same way and then use OpenNebula's command line to create a network, and it's pretty much the same. So that's the beauty, that you could look how networks can be configured using the command line in the documentation, and then just map it here, and that would work. Right. So with the VM, we are declaring that we would like to tap into the virtual network configuration. And then we need to select or set the name for our future network. So let's say that would be the private net, right? So that would be our private network. And then we would like to start configuring it, right? So we would like to set manage to true, that it's going to be managed, and then we would like to start the template, right? So after the template, so as soon as we declare the template, we must follow the OpenNebula style sheet. So it's basically no longer a YAML, but it's the OpenNebula configuration. And we need to take all the values from, again, OpenNebula way of creating networks. So for example, when you create a network from the command line, and you may structure it as a file, you need to tell the virtual network management driver, or basically what this virtual network driver is. And we have bridge, we have firewall, we have OVS, we have .1Q, or we have VXLAN. So again, this is something that you will check out in the documentation, how to write it correctly. But in case it's bridge, it would be bridge. In case it's bridge with security groups, you go with FW. In case it's VXLAN, well, obviously you go with the VXLAN. In my case, that's going to be bridge, right? As simple as that. Then, when you create a bridge, you may also set the custom bridge name. You may also set the, or you will need actually to set the physical device that you will hook up to. Now, the thing is that it may use a pre-created one. So if you already created a bridge with a specific name and it's already pretty much configured on the server side, or you're using the bond interface. So instead of like the physical uh, one interface, you're kind of using bond. So you can configure all that here, and it so the open OneDeploy will take this information and it's not going to try to create a bridge. It will hook up to the existing one. So again, all that is possible if you would like to, or you can let the Open Nebula's OneDeploy to take care of that. Now, the next thing is that um, if you're not going to set the PyDev, so the physical device, if it's not going to be set, then you are creating the host only network. That's the exclusive for the bridged type of network, that you can create a host only network. So it's not tied to any physical device, and then the traffic pretty much remains on the host, which is sometimes what you would like to do. And in my case, I would like to create a bunch of networks with the as the host only networks. So for this demonstration, that's why I'm not going to configure any physical device, and I'm not going to configure any bridge device right here. And obviously, no network in OpenNebula is valid without the address range, right? So you need to have an address range. It might be just the the MAC address range, or it may be IPv4 v6 address range, but it must be there, right? So I mean, empty network can be created, but it's not going to be usable. If you'd like to use it, then you must create the address range. Now, then you have type. So you obviously need to declare what type of network you would like it to be. So it might be the other if we're looking at just giving the MAC addresses to our VMs and not configuring any IP addressing, or it may be something like IP4, and that would be if you'd like to also define the IP address range. All right, for example, IP, and then it could be 192.168.20.20, right? And then you set the size of the network, right? That would be 20 addresses. So it would be the same if I would go with other, right? I just then need to delete this one, but I need to define type and size because I need to size it at least somehow. So just be aware if sometimes you are creating um, like the IP type of network and you have like 10 addresses pair, then in between there's already something, and then you have 10 extra IP addresses. So you will need, in this case, you will need to create two IP address ranges, right? So you have the range of 10 IP addresses, then you skip the middle one where you have a lot of stuff already, like, I don't know, it might be already existing servers, or might be some network equipment, whatever. And then you are giving the next batch of 10, right? In my case, I have the whole range spare, so I can keep it as 20. Right. So, and in this case, everything is set when it comes to variables that are commonly shared by all my target servers. Then I need to define who is who, right? Who is which server is front end, which server is the worker, the virtualization runner. Then if I would have, let's say, Grafana, then where to run Grafana. Then also if I would have a Bastion host, because I can have a Bastion host as well, uh, also known as jump host, then what is the jump host? If I'm going with EVPN, then I also need the reflectors to be configured. So I need to place the reflectors there. So there's quite a bunch of things. But if we go in a very simplistic way to kind of keep it time wise uh, adequate, and again, if you would like to check out more complex, we have like the federation stuff here, and that can give you like an example, or for example, you can go to infra, and this one also gives you quite a lot of various configurables that you can use. But we go simplistic here. So um, I need to define one single front end, and I need to define one single hypervisor, right? So how to tap into the front end configuration? I need to define front end as the variable, right? So I'm signaling to OneDeploy that what will be configured after that is the part of the front end bunch of the host. So what you will need to do, you will need to apply the front end role to that server, right? And then hosts. So I'm declaring the hosts. And last but not least, obviously, I need to set the actual host. So it may be like the control, or it may be like FR1 or F1. So whatever, whatever runs your boat. And then defining the Ansible host. And I need to set the IP or FQDN, right? So it also is something, and I need to get my from my list, right? So that would be the public IP of my front end. Now, for example, if I'll tell you in a bit one of the examples. Okay, and then the front end for now is done. What I need to take next is obviously the virtualization, and virtualization a worker is defined as the part of the node. So I define node, signaling to OneDeploy that all hosts under the node are the virtualization workers. So you need to configure it in that way, or install the necessary packages to run the virtualization. In my case, QEMU, right? So it's not KVM. But if you will remove it, then obviously it goes with KVM because, well, most of the time it's KVM. Um, so again, hosts, and then it may be like N1, for example, and same Ansible hosts, host. And I need to copy and paste the IP address of a node. Now, for example, if you running a mixed environment, you have one, let's say for whatever reason, you have one QEMU and you have one KVM, then you may actually point here your hardware, so your node HV, and map it to KVM. So and in the reality, obviously, you go everything KVM, but in case of my environment, I may run a mixed bag of virtualization tools, and then I may define them that way. Cool. So to be fair, that's it. My mine is done, and just to make sure, I'm also going to provide the secure shell private key file right? Just to make sure that I'm using the correct one. Otherwise, it's going to fail because I don't have the correct key set up. So let's try. And then we are going to run it as Ansible playbook, right? -I. So we need to set our inventory file. So that would be inventory custom deployment.yaml, and then OpenNebula deploy main. So, and then we have a lot of the output, right? Because, well, obviously, um, the Ansible must go through all the roles and see whether whether we have any mapping to that. Should we configure, for example, the same Grafana? Should we configure uh, the front end, or how many front ends we should configure, and so on? And based on that, we'll do the we'll make a decision whether you need to install a repository there or no. Well, it depends on the size of your deployment. It may take like 5 to 10 minutes to even more. Again, it depends on multiple factors, and the size is one of them. Then also the network that you have also is one of the things that may either speed up your deployment or obviously slow it down. But for now, let's see how it is getting deployed. If you have any questions, then that would be a very good moment to drop them in the chat. Ansible host, you mean this one? That refers to the actual target server. So in my case, as you can see, I'm running one front end, right, and one virtualization worker. So it's, as I mentioned, quite a simplistic environment. So I need to tell to the Ansible that this the host behind this IP address is the front end. So it must run the front end of uh, the front end of OpenNebula, and the host behind this IP address should run the virtualization worker. So KVM, QEMU, and so on. So that's what is behind the Ansible host. So, Philip, I hope I've answered your question. Simon, is it possible to configure nodes with different virtualization modes? Yes, some use KVM, some QEMU. Well, so first thing first, we at the moment we support KVM and QEMU with OneDeploy, and yeah, it is doable. You just need to um, set it in line, right? So it's not like you are setting it right here on the top in the general variables for all, but you will set this up inline, right? So that is the only thing that just kind of differs. But yeah, you can use a mixed bag. No worries. It is doable. Thanks for the question, Simon, and thanks for question, Philip. Obviously, if you'd like to see the full rundown, then just add more minus VVV, and then you get the better output if you are in the troubleshooting mode. Okay, so as we can see, some stuff were changed, right? Some stuff was okay. So again, it's like the Ansible output. So uh, obviously, then if you would like to kind of know more what stands behind okay or changed or unreachable, then feel free to check out Ansible documentation. But in general, changed means obviously changed. Okay means it's already there. And skipped 70. So why we've skipped a bunch of these? So why we have a bunch of these? Obviously, because not every role is suitable to our uh, hosts defined here. That's why we are skipping them at the moment. And yeah, we have a question. You said the Ceph can be mounted as a data store this way. Yeah, you can use OneDeploy with Ceph, and there is the dedicated YAML file for that, which gives you an example how Ceph looks like. And yeah, so we you can use Ceph with OneDeploy as well. Just mind that in our case, we also have the Ceph um, Ansible library for Ceph there. But the thing is that the um, Ansible, like the Ceph thing, is added just as a playbook, not as the role, as the exception. So just so you know, if you are planning to modify Ansible, then obviously that's stated in our documentation, but I feel that we need to stress this out. Okay, let's check whether my OpenNebula is up and running. And as you can see, it is up and running. And one admin. And then the password is obviously OpenNebula. So as you can see, OpenNebula is up and running. So I don't have any virtual machine templates, no images. It's no virtual machines, obviously. It's the clean OpenNebula installation. Although I do have one virtual network. Right. And that virtual network has the name of private net. It's the bridge, and it has 20, 20 addresses available, configured as the Ethernet. So only MAC addresses. And if we go into the infrastructure hosts, you will be able to locate the QEMU host added to my cluster, right? So which means that it's basically worked. And let's go to data stores and have a look at the data stores. And as I mentioned, if we find this one close to 100, then it uses the NFS storage as the data store, right? And obviously, we can go to the marketplace and import virtual machines if we need to, and then use it as it's any other OpenNebula environment. But what if we would like to add something? For example, I would like to add another node. I would like to add another QEMU node, and that would, well, eventually that's going to be the same IP address where I have the front end, which obviously is not the best way to go, but for sake of the experiment, why not? So we define it as N2 and take the IP address of the front end front end node. So what I would like to show with this is that you can actually have and then obviously run it again, you can actually have, so your server, your IP, your node, your host behind this IP address can have multiple roles assigned attached. So that's probably not what you'd like to sometimes in production. But let's say if you try to carry out some tests, you may just go in with a smaller batch of servers. So your tests are less expensive in that case. So before you kind of roll one deploy into production, you can carry out these tests in your test environment with the less number of servers. So yeah, you can reuse that. Right. So this time it's going to be faster, much faster. Why? Because well, majority of stuff is already there. Like for example, the repositories already installed, right? So the FS tab is already configured, and so on and so forth. But if that would be a fresh host, right? So just a recently added server, then obviously that would be slightly longer than what we have right now, because it would need to go through the same procedure as N1. So it means adding all the helpers, adding all the necessary repositories, configuring all the FS tabs, and so on and so forth. So that will uh, take a bit more time. But yeah, other than that, as you can see, um, it was pretty much fast. So now if we navigate to the hosts tab, we're supposed to see two servers, right, instead of one. And same would be with virtual networks. Let's say I would like to add a virtual network. So let's define a new one. And that would be, I don't know, backend net. So managed true, then template, vnmad. Let's say it would be bridge with firewall. And then the type is IP4, right? So since we do go with IP4 type, then we need to set obviously the IP address as well. So that would be 192.168.2020, the one that I intended in the first place, and size. So we must size it properly. So let's say have 50 uh, 50 addresses. Now, again, if you need any context and all that kind of stuff, then you can also add the context settings like DNS, gateway, and all that under the same template. Right, that should be it. So once again, we are hitting the enter button and going through the same stuff again. And it would be even faster than the previous one, right? Because, well, we don't need to configure anything but just create the uh, the networks, right? So just yet another network will be created. So let's give it a go and do all the necessary pre-checks. And we are finishing with creating the virtual networks. Right. So if everything was configured correctly and I had no uh, no mistakes, then my network should appear right here. So as you can see, the network is there, the range is there, and if we go to the address ranges, we can see that we have 50 IP addresses added. Right. And then now I can just go grab some Alpine Linux from the App Store and then deploy the virtual machine on my hosts and get my OpenNebula running. So yeah, as I mentioned, you get the fully running, fully capable OpenNebula deployment. Just what you don't need to do. You don't need to do all the manual labor, like adding all the packages and so on and so forth. And if you ever expanding, then just add yet another host here and you're good to go. Again, just make sure that this host is reachable by uh, from from your station where you are running Ansible. Right. And that would be it for my side for today. Any other questions? I'll be happy to answer. Obviously, in relation to this webinar. Don't forget that this session is getting recorded, so you can rewatch it later. That will be available in our YouTube. Then don't forget about joining our community. So we have a forum, and if you may ever had a problem, then there is a high probability that it was already resolved by someone. And yeah, it's worth to check out the forum, right? Then don't forget to follow us and subscribe to our news and attend other webinars. Yeah, we do have a question from Philip. Can you remove a node this way? Unfortunately, no. So if you will remove a node from the inventory, it's still going to appear in OpenNebula. So you will need to remove it actually from OpenNebula as well. Don't forget also to check out our documentation. Don't forget to grab your copy of OneDeploy repository, right? All that available. All right. So I don't see any questions coming from the chat. With this, then I would like to say thanks for attending. I would like to see you during my next webinar or during the webinars delivered by my colleagues. So stay tuned and see you again soon. Bye bye.